section 5.7, and now we are going to look at the ways that humans produce meat for consumption. So consider the following. Do you eat meat? And if so, how much and how often do you consume meat? What types of meat do you eat? Where do you get your meat from? What type of operations produce the meat that you eat? And is your carnivorous lifestyle sustainable? What can you do to find out? So I want you to think about all those questions. And I know that's a lot, but take 5 or 10 minutes to answer them. And think kind of deeply about your daily habits, okay, in terms of consuming meat. So pause the video and then come back in about 5-10 minutes once you have answered. Okay, so let's talk about how meat is produced. And we're going to compare what are called feedlots and what would be called a free range operation. So first we're going to start with feedlots, and we'll call them CAFOs, or concentrated animal feeding operations, aka factory farms. And these are the places that you think of when you hear like PETA or environmentalist organizations that are against the treatment of animals in certain places, right? These are going to be the places where animals are being bred very quickly. They're being given hormones and other antibiotics, and they're really kept in pretty small confines. So it's not really ideal for those animals. So a lot of animals are raised in a small area. They're going to be fed food that are not necessarily meant to be fed to them, right? It wouldn't be their first choice, obviously, if they were free-range animals, but they're fed things like grains, soybeans, fish meal, and that fish meal is basically, so you take a fish, whatever humans do not consume, like the meat, that all will be ground up and that becomes fish meal, and then fish oil too. And their food will sometimes be doctored with hormones to help them to grow faster, and antibiotics to protect them from potential pathogens, because they're in such close confines that it would be very easy for a bacterium to go from one animal to the next and spread very quickly. So a CAFO has the ability to house 1,000 cattle, 2,500 hogs, or even, in the terms of hundreds of thousands of chickens and turkeys, which is just a really crazy amount. And you can see here, this is a cattle feedlot in Arizona, and I'd be willing to guess that there is probably more than 1,000 cattle here, to be honest, just looking at this picture. Okay, now, how is a CAFO different from free-range grazing? Well, with free-range grazing, the animals are allowed to just go throughout the expanse of the land and eat what they want. Okay, so grazers will eat their grass, browsers will eat the shrubs. Okay, so that's a good distinction to know. Grazing, those are animals that eat grass, and browsing, those are animals that eat shrubs. But a rangeland would be a natural grassland. So a pasture would be something that is owned by somebody, but rangeland would be an unfenced or public place, public grasslands for farmers to be able to feed their animals, okay? And then, down here, pastures would be managed grasslands. So ones that are really more domesticated than wild, where there would be plants that are advantageous, grow quickly, or be nutritious for the animals. Okay, so this would be more of like a private, expansive land for a farmer. All right, so within the past 70 years, global meat production has increased by more than 6-fold, going all the way from below 50 million tons to almost 300 million tons. And you can see here comparing the United States, which has certainly increased. I would say it's doubled in the past 70 years. But China, look at China. It's gone from less than 10 million tons to producing 90 million tons, which is an increase of 900%. Okay, so that's a pretty significant increase. So yeah, now the consumption of meat has increased by quite a bit and is expected to keep increasing. The most commonly consumed meats are pork, poultry, so chicken and turkey, as well as beef. So some of the problems with meat production that we're going to talk about is just a large amount of greenhouse gases that are produced. So just all of the machinery, the energy that goes into these industrial operations that produces carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. Methane will be produced by the digestion, really the means of digestion for cows to be able to break down the food that they eat. And this production of methane is actually a very significant contributor to the world's greenhouse gases. Okay, so that is something to keep in mind. So an interesting fact here is that actually the production of methane is increased with cows that eat grass compared to cows that eat grain. It's just a little bit easier for them to digest the grain than it is for them to digest the grass. They can digest both, but eating grass will require more action by the bacteria in their gut to break down the grass. So antibiotics are put into their feed to help to prevent the spread of disease, to protect them in these like really close confines. And as we know, antibiotics will lead to genetic resistance in bacteria. So that would be a problem for bacteria that become genetically resistant to the antibiotics, and they could infect the cows. But not only that, bacteria could then possibly jump species and eventually affect humans as well. So deforestation caused by the need for the land to produce these pastures, that's another disadvantage of meat production. And then anytime the land is overgrazed by the cattle or whatever livestock, then that can lead to erosion and as a result of the grasses being removed. Okay, so this is a nice little chart that summarizes those things that I've been talking about. There are some advantages though. So that would include an increase in meat supplies that helps to reduce the overgrazing in the pastures or in the rangelands. So that's good because that helps to protect that land from desertification as a result of overgrazing, removing the grasses that may not be able to grow back, and then the erosion. And CAFOs also help to keep food prices low because it's going to be cheaper to raise the cattle in a large operation than it would be to allow them to go on a free range. Now, there are some pretty intense environmental effects of CAFOs. So yes, they are cheap, but that does not really take into account the full cost pricing. So some of the really negative impacts that CAFOs have on the environment. It's going to take a lot of water to support one of these concentrated animal feedlots. So it actually takes more water to produce, we'll say like a pound of beef than it does to produce the same amount of pork, chicken, eggs, and milk combined. So think about that. It just takes an incredible amount of water to support the raising of cows to produce beef. Irrigation water is used inefficiently, as we have seen, and that is going to contribute to the depletion of groundwater supplies. So not only is it very water dependent, but if the water is being used inefficiently, then that's even more that's going to be wasted. And water is also used to wash away the animal waste, which is going to use more water. And not only that, but that will lead to the pollution of nearby streams whenever this stuff gets into those water ecosystems. There is a lot of waste produced by the meat industry. So like animal wastes, that equals more than 67 times that of the United States' entire country's human wastes. And some of the waste from the meat industry can be used as fertilizer, but the main problem is just the use of the antibiotics and hormones that stuff can potentially contaminate the crops, and that would be a big problem. And not only that, but it smells really bad. Okay. So some of it can be used as nutrient rich fertilizers. The rest is just going to get disposed of and into like little lagoons that are nearby to try to keep all that in one area. But the problem is like it can potentially run off if there's a big rain event or if there's a breach to that lagoon. So that would be very bad. And not only that, but all of the waste in the breakdown of these wastes in aerobic or anaerobic conditions can lead to the production of greenhouse gases. So what are some things that we can do? Well, consume less meat. By consuming less meat, it may be more easy to grow, less water or land dependent fruits and vegetables and grains. You can lower our dependence on the meat. So less land will need to be used to produce the plants over meat. So going vegetarian would certainly help. Okay, or at least eating less will definitely help as well. All right, I'm not necessarily advocating you to go and become a vegan, but maybe consuming less meat will help, even just a little bit. Okay, so all of these advantages, so reducing the amount of greenhouse gases, conserving water, reducing the amount of antibiotics and hormones that need to be used, and then also helping to improve conditions for topsoil, those are all advantages of just consuming less meat and lowering our dependence on it. Promoting free-range grazing will help too, because then that will help the animals out. They'll be more healthy. There will be less need for antibiotics and hormones, as well as other dangerous chemicals. But that may put a little bit more stress on the land and on consumers because this would be a bit more expensive. Okay, and that is the end of 5.7. So next we're going to go into 5.8, which deals with fisheries.